Okay, so in this section, we're going to take a look at the Wavetable editor in depth. In my opinion, this is what really kind of sets Serum apart from almost any other soft synth I've ever come into contact with. In fact, it does set it apart from every other soft synth I've come into contact with. Up until now, we could have achieved very similar results in something like Massive, or even in Bitwig's own polysynth that lets you cross between like a square and a sawtooth wave. Now, the great thing about this program is we can set our own. Not only can we set our own wavetables based on presets that they have determined for us, but we can draw each stage of the wavetable if we want to do that. So if I click just here on this background, right now we just have a sine wave, and if I change this wavetable position, nothing is happening. And that will all make sense in a second. If I click, we get this other display. And what this display would show me if I had multiple wavetables in here is where those wavetables are falling and where this program is attempting to fill in the gaps. So if we just take one at random, let's take FM Freak, for example, we can see now we get a lot of green, there's some gray, and we can now scroll through here to different positions on the wavetable. So it looks like at one point there's something like a sine wave around 118, like so. And as I click, we can actually see how this is morphing and changing into what looks like a sine wave there. So this one might be really cool to listen to. Okay, so that's all well and good, but how would I edit this if I wanted to? All you have to do is click on this little pencil icon here and we go into the Wavetable editor. So what I'm seeing here is that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, approximately 15 different wavetables that have been manually drawn in. And then what's happened is, and we'll go through this, we've actually morphed those 15 together to create for us a 256 stage wavetable. And I can drag through all of those stages here. If I actually wanted to go into one of these ones that's been created and make adjustments, I could by either drawing it in or going up to the harmonic spectrum up here and messing around. Okay, and if I drag through these, we can actually see the locations of where the perfect ones are. So for example, 21, and then something like 59 or 99, excuse me, looks like a perfect sine wave. And you can see how these are changing throughout. All right, so the first thing we can look at, we'll put this back to our sine wave. I'll go to the editor here. First thing we can do is actually flip this guy from down here up into what I like to call the Harmonics editor. I think it's called the FFT editor. And what this is going to allow us to do is basically create, oops, sorry guys, clicked the wrong button. Let me change this around. Let me go back to getting a sine. You can actually go to undo here. Might not let me get back to sine. I'll just go ahead of myself, pull up a sine again, and now bring it up to the FFT. And what we will be able to see here if I zoom this in is just our fundamental occurring at this stage right here. And this bottom area is referring to the phase of this sine wave. So we're turning this into almost like an additive synthesizer. And if you've seen this in the operator in Ableton Live, you know exactly what we're doing. We're drawing in overtones. We're drawing in additional sine waves, and then we can adjust that phase position. So right now, this phase is at 50%. And that makes a lot of sense because if we go back, if I can get this back at 50, we can look and see that, yep, our phase is corresponding to that. It's at 50%. I could go in here and I could change this down to 0, and you watch and see how that changes. Okay, so now our sine wave is starting at the beginning of the cycle instead of in the middle. Or we could go all the way up to 100%. It's not going to change anything, but it's now basically starting on the next cycle through. And if you're ever confused about harmonics and these things, I have plenty of videos on the polysynth and also just on talking about harmonics in general, where I cover all this stuff in greater detail. But for now, let's experiment and let's explore some of these formulas down here. You can actually type in your own formula, like you see has been done here, but I'm not smart enough to do that. My mathematics career ended with calculus, and it wasn't a pretty end. So let's go in here, and we have a lot of classics. We have just saw, for example, and we can see what that looks like. And I'm going to transfer this up to the FFT. And if you know anything about harmonics, you'll know we'll see even and odd ordered harmonics. So for example, 2, 4, 6. That's not corresponding to where those fall in the harmonic series, but those are the numbers. And we have what's going to be a perfect sawtooth wave generated by that formula. And we can zoom all the way across and see how this is working. So you see all of our phases are set to 50 for a perfect type of saw wave. I could also go in and we could take a look at the square wave. Transfer that up. And now we can see we only have odd ordered harmonics descending like so all the way across. We could go in and we could load in a triangle wave. Triangle wave is going to be odd ordered harmonics, but a much steeper cutoff. And there's all sorts of things in between. So if you want, you can actually go in here and adjust these yourself. So let's say we like the sound of this triangle wave, but maybe we want to hype a few of the even ordered harmonics just at random to see what happens. I can right click in here and I could select draw even harmonics only. And so by selecting that, if I try to click in here and draw up new harmonics, it's only going to let me do it at those even points. So if I go to 23, it's not going to let me do it. But whoop, 22, we're drawing in something new. And then I could also adjust the phase of this, which will change the wave quite dramatically, especially if it's something at a strange location. So maybe that's a little too extreme. Let's keep it up more towards these consonant intervals here. And we can watch and see how this is changing. And then if I want to get real fancy, I can go up to the top and just kind of be a jerk and drop some in here to really screw everything up. And they've gone to painstaking depths to make sure that things in the very, very high end are actually reproduced down here. Okay, so you're going to have to probably turn up pretty loud, have really good speakers to be able to hear some of these differences, but they are there. We'll just go in and just kind of draw some things in for fun. If you want to get real crazy, you can zoom this out and just kind of go like. But as you can hear, if we do too crazy of adjustments at the top especially, it just ends up causing like all these sorts of phase problems and we lose any power to the sound. But if that does happen, I should be able to go in here, select single and select normalize. That should bring things up a little bit. So let's go back to our sine wave. But hopefully you can see that there's so much power in that, and so you can draw in your even and odd ordered harmonics however you want. A couple other nice features. We have randomize. Okay, so we can randomize the whole thing. And that's frequently going to be the sounds you get. Now maybe I don't want anything above this 400 mark. I can go in here, I can right click, and I can actually select to clear high frequencies 414 to the end. Like so. You can do the opposite and clear things towards the other direction, but be more careful with that because you want to keep your fundamental if you want to keep everything in pitch and in tune. But I could right click and I could maybe create random series of gaps. Why not? Let's shift this an octave down. Like so. And then we could go back in here and randomize the low 16. That's what's going to make the biggest difference to your sound. And if it starts to get out of control, you could always go clear things and draw things in how you see fit. So we could turn this off so we could draw in both even and odd ordered. Turn our zoom up a bit. Pull this right over. And now maybe... So that's one way that we can draw things in. I'm going to load up a sine wave again and show you the other way. So if you're not super familiar and confident with working in the FFT, you can also go into this draw mode here. All right, and this is pretty cool. So I'm just going to flip that back up again so we can see the changes we're making. And I have all of these different options. So if we do something like that, that's what it ends up looking like in the FFT. And for a lot of us, this is the way to go because it keeps things very smart and organized because we're working on a grid. We're working with something fixed. And I could pull this down if I want to get some different changes. So we have all different sorts of shapes. If we want to actually create more of a saw. And then maybe go the inverse on the way down. That's not as much fun. Let's add in some parabolas. Add one right here. Or the inverse. Let's see what that looks like. And now if we want to kind of push the phase on this, what we can actually do is move these left and right. So we get different starting points, or up and down. And then we could also change the grid amount. So if we want more options going up, I personally like to keep this squared out. Just for myself, it works a little bit better in my opinion. And we have all sorts of different shapes that we can draw in here if we want. And there's also this kind of like noise generator, which surprisingly doesn't have as big of an impact as you would think. We can look how crazy that's going to be. Not as crazy as I thought, but because they're so steep and occurring inside this grid, we're getting a lot more upper harmonic content going on. Normally, you won't see too much happening up here unless you do something crazy like that. And so, you know, this is up to you to kind of experiment with, figure out all of the differences, but it's one way that you can create your own wave shapes from the start. So that one actually sounds pretty cool by itself, but let's bring this back out to the initialized state. What we're going to do this time is actually create a wavetable. So like what we see here, you know, we can change this up and go across. Let's make one ourselves, and let's make a super simple one. We're going to go from a triangle wave into a sawtooth wave into a square wave. So back to the old access virus. And I'm going to go in here. All right, let's just clear that out. I don't know why I always like to do that. So we have our sine wave here, but we can add in additional wavetables. And with each wavetable in this order, when you actually go to morph these all together into 256 wavetables, it depends on how many you have in here. So we'd be morphing from 1 to 2, and then morphing from 2 to 3, etc. So in 2, or in 1, let's change this to a triangle wave. Keep it in phase. In 2, let's change that to our sawtooth wave. And in 3, let's change this to a square wave. Okay, like so. But right now, we just have these 3 choices, right? So that's not really all that interesting, and they're not even morphing. I just have to go and select these different positions. So that's another way. If you want to just have a bunch of different wave shapes, you can maybe like load up 10 just to pick something you want to use. But in the synthesizer, that's not its strength. That's not really what it's designed for. What's actually designed to do is morph between these guys. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to click morph here. And now we have a few different options. We have a morph using crossfade, a spectral with zeroing out the fundamental phase, and then we also have a zeroing out of all phases. This one's kind of interesting to choose, but it's up to you, whatever you want to pick. So let's start with morph crossfade. And we can see that we've now created 256 wavetables. And as I scroll up between these, we can watch and see how this is changing. Hit on that 129 all the way up like so. And now if I go back, We could morph between like so. We could add an LFO to change that, throw an envelope on there. Really cool, super powerful. I hope that Bitwig's polysynth allows something like this in the future. It probably won't though, now that Serum's been released, because I think it's kind of cornered the market on this ability right here. The other thing we can do is we have a few additional options here inside of either single. Process is going to process each and every single one of these wavetables if we change something, like if we flip vertical, it flips every single one of these vertical, as opposed to just the one if we were to do that in single mode. But one of the cooler ones is sample redux at grid size. So I could go in here and like, let's increase this to like 25 by 25. And what this is going to do is it's kind of going to eliminate the curves. Let's use the process on all of them so that it's uniform across. I think you can do this for all of them. You may not be able to. Sample redux at grid size. So that's pretty cool. Add a little bit of extra grit to your sounds, kind of like a redux. But we could undo that if we wanted to. Or maybe we can't undo that. Ooh. That's not good. We're going to have to start all the way over. There are many processes in here that you can undo, but obviously not every single one of them can you undo. So be aware of that from the start. We could add as many wavetables in here as we want. We then also have the ability to process these differently. So let me just start this process over again so you can see it. And we're going to choose a different algorithm. So I have a sine. I want to change that to a triangle. Next guy is going to be a sawtooth wave. And the last one is going to be a square. Okay, so this time let's go ahead and select Morph. And for Morph, I'm going to choose Spectral 0 all phases. And this one's kind of interesting because you can see how it's really narrowed this guy up a bit. And so it makes these transitions a little bit more smooth. Okay, you can see how that shape has adjusted as compared to what I did before. And we could listen back to that. Like so. And this is up to you to be as creative as you want to be. And then if I wanted, I could go into like number 2, for example. And just to be crazy, I'll change number 2 quite a bit. And now you can see how from 1 to 2 we make this huge leap. If I can get it on 2. But then from 2 to 3, etc., it's going back to what we had before. So what we'd have to do is go in here and morph it again. This time let's choose Morph Spectral. Okay, so you can see how it's adjusted those. It's pulled this to 86, 171, 256. So now we have the classic like 4-wave wavetable here. So obviously plenty of potential for that. Okay, the other thing that we have the ability to do is drag and drop samples into these oscillator slots to create our own unique wavetables based on a sample that we have. I'm not going to go into the details about how all of these different algorithms work. I'll show you one, and then I'll leave it up to you to try out the other ones. A lot of them are very self-explanatory if you think about the numbers that appear here. So let's just go in, and I'm just going to take this kick sample. Okay, that's awfully powerful, but that's what I'm going to use. So if I drag this into this oscillator slot, we get these different selections. So import normal, dynamic pitch, 0 snap, dynamic pitch follow, constant frame size, pitch average. This isn't even a pitch sound, so we're probably going to use this first one. Then we also have FFT 256, FFT 512, 1024, 2048. So I'll leave it up to you to try all these different models out. I'm just going to use the first one. And so that's what's generated and given me. And if we look at the waveform of the sample down here, you can see how this kind of trails off to the end to silence. And this is why you just want to have a short little burst of something interesting. Because as we go to the end here, and we're at wavetable position 57, we can see nothing is really happening there until we pull it back. And then actually start to get some interesting things here. So maybe I like this one here. I could go in. Add a bit of that in there. Maybe throw on a bit of oscillator sync. The sound's not big enough for me. Let's turn on oscillator B. Maybe we could add something in here that would be interesting. Maybe the ASIM. Let's turn this one down. Doesn't really seem to be doing much of anything. Let's take a look at maybe pulse width. Okay, let's bring back in some of one. Turn on this sub guy here. Try to find the right range for the sub. Bring up the master so we can really add a lot of power to this sub level. Maybe I could turn on the filter, change the mode, add some resonance in here, pull the cutoff down, have oscillator B go through there. Let's pull the sub direct out so it's not being impacted by the filter. And maybe we'll take envelope 2, route that to the cutoff. Let's actually make some adjustments. So something like that. Then we could go into the effects section, maybe throw a distortion on here. And a patch like so. And all of that started with that sample that we decided to drag in there. Very cool, a lot of fun. That's really the wavetable section. If you have any additional questions, feel free to let me know. This is where I think the synthesizer has the most power. This is what makes it unique. It's ultimately the reason why I decided to buy it, because I know that I can't really recreate this with anything else. All right, thanks a lot for watching. Take care.